Rousset will now demonstrate 5 variations of the arm throw. The first, grabbing his opponent's wrist, executing a pivot step, pulling his arm over his right shoulder, executing a throw. For a second variation, his opponent will grab his wrist, he will execute a pivot step, pulling the arm again over his right shoulder, hitting the throw. For the next 3 variations, Rousset will work off his opponent from a 2-in-1 situation. Forcing into his opponent, grabbing him above the elbow, executing the throw. In the next situation, he will go from a 2-on-1, breaking his opponent's grip, forcing him to step in when he resists, executing the pivot step and the throw. For the last variation of the arm throw, he will break his opponent's grip, again from the 2-on-1, executing a quick pivot step and a throw. Rousset will now demonstrate 4 more variations of the arm throw. The first one, he will force his opponent to step. He will execute it from the near side, a duck under, lifting him with his right elbow. For a second variation, he will force his opponent to step. He does not resist. He will grab his opponent's far wrist, push into him to set up an arm throw. For his third variation, he will execute an arm throw from a collar tie, stepping into his opponent. For the last variation of this series, he will demonstrate an arm throw from a collar tie where his opponent will now allow him to step in, so he will pull his opponent into him. Rousset will now demonstrate 6 more variations off the arm throw. In the first situation, his opponent will have a 2-on-1 situation. He will break his opponent's grip, grabbing his opposite wrist, lifting his elbow, rotating the arm to come to a parallel position, then rotating into the arm to execute an arm throw. Rousset will now demonstrate a second variation off the same situation. One in which his opponent will step back. In the third variation, Rousset will have the 2-on-1 situation. For For the third variation, reset will have the 2-on-1 situation. Pulling his opponent in, he will execute an arm throw. For the fourth variation, reset will tie both of his opponent's wrists, pushing into his opponent, receiving resistance back. Pivoting to execute an arm throw. For the fifth variation, reset will have both his opponent's wrists tied. He will twist his right wrist to the outside, executing a pivot step, tying his opponent's wrist behind his back, executing an arm throw. For the last variation, reset will tie both his opponent's wrists. His opponent will reach to grab his forearm. He will pivot and execute an arm throw. Reset will now demonstrate several non-related series moves. First, a wrist and collar tied to a front headlock situation, pivot step to an arm throw. In the second variation, his opponent will collar tie reset. He will counter with a hip throw. In the third variation, reset's opponent will tie his near wrist. He will counter with a hip throw. For the fourth variation, from a similar situation where his opponent will tie his far wrist, reset will counter with a hip throw. In the fifth variation, reset's opponent will push off of both his shoulders. He will tie both his opponent's wrists and execute a hip throw. For the sixth variation, reset will execute a hip throw from an underhook situation. In the last variation, reset will execute a hip throw from an underhook situation where he slides back to his opponent's elbow. This completes our series.